Welcome, everyone, to this month's Masterclass with my guest, Ashleigh Saith. Ashleigh is runs another agency focused on supporting small nonprofits with their fundraising, just like ours. And so we share a lot of information and insight and just support each other in the process. And she also holds a position of, what's your actual title?
I am the manager of annual programs at Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital Foundation, which is Canada's largest pediatric rehabilitation hospital.
Yeah, and if any of you are interested in if you look at other organizations for inspiration around their fundraising, theirs is one to watch. So subscribe to their list. Their e-appeals are phenomenal.
Okay.
Their fundraising, there you go. The fundraising campaigns, you will learn so much just from getting their information. So I highly recommend that. Holland Bloorview Foundation is probably what they would look up.
Yep.
So today we're going to be talking about monthly giving, and I asked Ashleigh to speak about that because she's seen two very different sides. She, in her previous role at an organization, she was responsible for building up a massive monthly giving program for a very small organization. And now in her role at a larger organization is focusing on building from the ground up a monthly giving program. So she's really seen all ends of that spectrum and is in the process now of kicking things off and building some momentum. So I'm going to start, Ashleigh, just tell me about why monthly giving is an important part of your revenue model.
Yeah. So at Holland Bloorview right now, we have a we have a direct marketing program that's kind of just getting back up and running. We took a few years off and then came back to it. So I've been there for about just over a year getting that back up. And monthly giving is a really great way to kind of like set it and forget it, but without forgetting it, with some of your donors. So you want to grab some monthly donor attention because those donors actually have the highest retention rates of most of your donors. So their retention rates are close to 80%. They're usually giving, $20, $24 a month. And that means that they're really sustaining. There's less administrative work with that group. They're your most loyal and committed donors. They're a really great way to engage. And they're the people who are really going to go to bat for you. So it's a really important group of people to focus on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where do you start? You started from, you came into a program that the program has lapsed, right? Or had lapsed. So these are people who haven't heard from you in a while.
Yeah.
What do you do to begin that?
We had a small group of monthly donors, probably about somewhere between 90 and 100, who had just started giving monthly kind of, unsolicited. So a bunch of them had just knew it was an option, went on the website, saw, make it monthly on our donation form, and just decided to start giving. In some cases, people responded that way to direct mail, but there wasn't really much attention being paid to that group. So I kind of did a quick just analysis of where everything was at with that program, which wasn't really a cohesive program, and then put together an idea for first off stewarding the donors that we already had, and then moving into acquiring new ones. So part of that was just getting on the phone, talking to them. It was either me or Holland Bloorview has a really great family leader program. So we engage the families who come to the hospital to become volunteers in different ways. And one of the things they love doing is saying thank you to our donors. So we had a couple volunteers come in and basically call all of our monthlies and say, hey, you know what? Just want to say thanks for your support. It helps families like mine, and they were able to share their stories. And so one of the first things that we actually did was think about the brand of our monthly giving program. It didn't really have a cohesive brand, so we named it Team Possible. We gave it its own logo, and that way when we were reaching out to our monthly donors who were existing, we were able to say, hey, we're restarting this whole program. You're a founding donors. We want you to be part of it. Are you in? So we got to be able to, we were able to get them all excited about the program again.
Cool.
That's kind of where we started.
What kind of insight did you get from those phone calls?
For us, lots of our monthly donors were connected to us because they had a family member or a friend who used our services. So we're a hospital for kids with disabilities and complex medical needs. And so a lot of them were grandparents, aunts and uncles, some parents. So there was quite a close connection to the cause. And it was great because we're able to hear those stories from them as well as from the family leaders that were saying thank you.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I think that's so important because oftentimes we're like sitting in our office kind of doing our thing based on what we think we know is right or important. But your first step was to actually go back to your donors and hear from them directly, which is something I advocate at all levels of giving. Yeah. So that's fantastic. So now you have a program. Mm-hmm. Where do you find your donors?
Yeah, so I'm trying to be really great at segmenting. Something that we kind of reevaluated when I stepped into the role there. The first place that I tend to look is at the donors in the annual fund. So not necessarily our event donors because they're not as responsive. Not really our major donors because that doesn't really make sense for that group. Yeah. So I looked at the donors who were giving online and through our little direct mail program to see which of them were either giving by credit card, because that's a good indicator of someone who will sign up for monthly giving, or people who were giving 2 or more gifts in a year, but under our major gifts, like cumulatively under our major gifts threshold. So if they're giving twice a year, they might be more inclined to give 12 times a year, maybe increasing a little bit, but instead spreading their giving out through the year. So those are the first 2 places I looked. And then also our new donors. So anyone who was coming in, especially over the holidays, we get a big rush of new donors in. So that group, asking them to give again, to give monthly within the first couple months of their giving is a good opportunity for them.
I love that because I hear a lot of people are so hesitant to ask people who just gave to give again. Which I'm sure you've heard too, and it goes against all of our...
it feels counterintuitive.
Yeah. It goes against everything we like to believe. And what we think donors are telling us, right? We think that they're fatigued, that they don't want to hear from us, they don't want to be asked so many times. So tell me how you navigate that process, because not just like ask and ask again.
Yeah, right? For sure.
So what happens in between?
Yeah, there's stewardship. So especially with your new donors who might be giving for different reasons. Somebody asked them to give, they're giving through an event. They saw, like we do, we have Facebook ads running a lot, so they may have seen an ad. They don't fully know who we are. What we've implemented is a stewardship welcome package. So the first thing they get after they get their tax receipt and their thank you letter is a package saying, welcome to the family. Here's some things we thought you might want to know about us. And it includes a story about a kid. It includes a little bit about who we are and our history, not too much of that stuff because it's not as intriguing to them. A little bit about kind of how their donations are used. So those pie charts are a really great thing to include in that. And then some other ways to get involved. And those are usually non-financial. So do you want to volunteer? Do you want to sign this petition? Those kinds of engagement asks that are not necessarily another financial contribution. So they get that. If they're a new donor over a certain threshold, they'll also get a thank you call, welcoming them to the family. We do it by donation threshold just because of our internal capacity. I would love to be able to call every single person and say thanks, but we don't have the resources to do that. And then they get pulled into some of our other stewardship stuff. So they'll get our e-newsletter, they'll get random impact reports and things like that. So they get some impact reporting and thanking before they get an ask for a second gift.
And have you had enough time to see how that converts?
Not quite yet. So this will be my first full year cycle at Holland Bloorview. So I haven't seen whether or not that's made an impact yet, but I suspect it will. I did similar strategies in my old role when I was at Women's Shelter, and they converted. So we had a pretty decent new conversion rate for monthly donors.
How about any negative feedback from people?
Surprisingly little. People are pretty happy when you say thank you and welcome.
Yeah.
And I'm of the belief that donors will drive their donation communication preferences. So I will go with the plan until someone tells me otherwise, basically. So I don't want to make assumptions about how donors want to be communicated with. I want to ask them and find out from them. So sometimes that's as simple as including an engagement survey of some kind in with their welcome series. They can let me know, how often do you want to hear from us? What's the best way to communicate with you?
Yeah.
And that way, if you're listening to what they're telling you and following those guides, then people won't be that upset.
So that's awesome, but it also sounds like a ton of work. So tell me a little, like even organizations with antiquated systems or no systems, we work with a lot of organizations that are on spreadsheets.
Yeah.
How do you manage the back end of the?
Yeah. So in my old role, it was a one-person shop, and we had 900 monthly donors. So I've worked with not having a lot of resourcing. Volunteers were my best friends. I always made sure that there was a volunteer who was keen on coming in, and I tried to find volunteers who liked to do admin work, to come in and just be like, here's a list that you need to put together packages for, put them together, I'll sign it all, send it off. So taking advantage of volunteers, repurposing materials. So if you've already written a really great story for something, use that in your welcome package. Use that in some of your communications with your monthly donors. Lots of people forget that they've read a story. People won't remember if you shared it last month. So you can do it all over again. Nobody will notice.
Yeah. People forget. I think it takes 8 to 12 times for them to remember a message that you give them. So,
and if you've sent something in your e-newsletter, like chances are 20% of the people opened it, maybe 1% of the people clicked on it. So you're pretty good to assume that people haven't seen the thing that you're probably sharing again. So volunteers, repurposing, and then just getting a little bit organized and making sure you have some systems in place to make sure that you can kind of keep organized that way.
Yeah. So taking a step back, a little bit back. So now you have, or I guess you have these prospective donors. You've segmented your list. So you're looking at annual donors who've given more than once a year, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
People when they first give or recently made a gift. What tools do you use to solicit or ask for them to join monthly giving?
Yeah. One of the first things that I would do is make sure that you have a page on your website dedicated solely to monthly giving, so that if you're ever like having a conversation with someone or a casual email, you always have a link that you can send them. So you can put up on your site, what we've done at Holland Blue Review is a page that has like 3 donation asks. So it's like $10 buys art supplies every month, then $25 does gardening supplies. So just kind of having those handles up on your website is really helpful for people to see. And then other tools, what I would do is if you have any kind of direct marketing program where you're sending solicitation appeals, I always include a monthly giving ask. Some direct marketers would tell you not to do that. The bread and butter of monthly giving comes through direct mail. So most of the people who signed up since I've been at Holland Blue Review and when I was at Interval House came through direct marketing. So
and
always
are they receiving sign in the mail and giving online, or are they sending you back? They're mailing you back
They're mailing it back. Yeah. So a small handful of people then go online, but most people just like write their credit card number on the form and send it back in. So direct marketing has been one of the main ways of acquiring those donors.
Yeah.
You could also, pick up the phone and make some phone calls. If you have lots of budget, there's agencies that will do that telemarketing for you, but you don't really need it. It's great if you have a little bit of experience to give them a call yourself and see if they're interested. Always start it with like a thank you and then roll into monthly giving. So.
Yeah. Excellent.
And one of the things that I do with the direct mail program is I'll create a segment in that group of people who I want to target for monthly giving. So I'm not going to ask everybody to give monthly. I'll create a segment, and then that segment will get either a different letter, or like sections of the letter will have different copy in it that'll ask them specifically for a monthly gift.
For an organization that has limited capacity, what's the number one or the top two things that they should really, like, they can't have a monthly giving program without these things in place?
Buy-in from your organization's probably the top one. Recognizing that you're going to need to carve out some time for it, and having the support to do that is really important. And then just kind of getting your systems in place, like knowing how you're actually going to process those gifts every month, what banking information you need, what legal stuff you've got to follow. So just those administrative bits and pieces are really important to have in place. And even as part of that admin, knowing how you're going to follow up. So you're going to have people whose monthly gift doesn't go through that month, or who are calling to terminate or calling to update information. Just kind of having all those processes in place will help in terms of efficiency of you knowing what to do, and then it'll save you time in the long run.
Ruby's asking us to explain buy-in a little bit more. Maybe tell us a time when you had to build buy-in and what that was like. Why were people hesitant to invest in developing a monthly giving program?
I think one of the hesitations around investing in the monthly giving program is it is an investment. So you're doing a lot of upfront work for basically a long-term payback, basically. So some organizations may not be ready to do that. Some organizations may not have enough of a donor base to start thinking about monthly giving. So you want to talk to your leadership about like what this looks like for your organization. Will you, 5 years down the road, where can this go? What can this look like? And I think being able to position it as a long-term growth strategy will help you get that buy-in organizationally. Both from your leadership and from other people in the organization who might be able to help you promote it, share it on social media, that kind of thing.
So where can it go? Tell us a little bit about how big it was at Interval House.
When I first started, so Interval House was a unique place in that we were a tiny organization with a humongous annual program. So we raised about $900,000 just through direct mail and $200,000 through monthly giving. And that was with a staff of 1 and 2 towards the end. And we, but long before I started, the executive directors there kind of knew that monthly giving was where they wanted to invest a lot of upfront money to see that long-term payoff. So they actually started with a giant direct response television program, which that's where the bulk of the donors came in. So we got a couple hundred monthly donors through there. And once you get a few donors in the door where you can really leverage that and show people, look at all these people doing this. Don't you want to be part of it? And then everyone will start to kind of come on board and join. It's that social proof marketing concept.
Very cool. I had someone in advance reach out and ask me, they have an event, and I know you mentioned events earlier, and we'll talk about the events and monthly donors, but basically their question was, can you leverage your event attendees to either become monthly donors, or once they donate outside of the event, like, are you at risk of cannibalizing your event success? Now, I know my own perspective, but let's talk a little bit about like why event attendees make challenging donors. But if there was a really great group in the room, how can you leverage that opportunity to build your monthly giving program?
So event donors tend to be, in my experience, not super responsive when it comes to asking them to give through other channels. mainly because they have more of a tangential relationship with the organization. They might know you through a friend. They might be buying a ticket to something, and they see it more transactional than philanthropic. So sometimes it's a bit challenging for them to really connect what they're doing at the event with what the cause is.
Yeah. Which that in and of itself is an opportunity to unlock things. Like if you take that event and make it all about your mission and impact, you prime the room better than if it's just like a nice gala and
I think making sure that your events are always really, really tied to the mission. One of the things that we do really well at Holland Bloorview is we have an ambassador program of kids who speak in public, in the media, at events. And so the gala that we do every year is hosted and emceed by our kids. So people get to see firsthand, isn't it? It's pretty awesome. So people get to see firsthand what the impact is of their giving, and those donors tend to be a bit more inclined to give in other ways throughout the year. We have a large portfolio of third-party and community events, which is where the bigger challenge is for us, because we have not as much control over the event format and messaging as we would for an internal event. So with those donors, it's more about, if we can get a kid out there, get a rep out there, making sure we have someone there to speak, and then thinking about how we're purposely cultivating that group once they get in the door. So we might have someone who does a run program for us. They've fundraised and all their friends are giving. We may, in that welcome strategy I was talking about earlier, we may tailor it to that group to be like, you ran for Holland Bloorview, check out all these really cool sports programs that we have here. So we try and tie in what the initial event was to what we are sharing with them, and then down the road asking them for.
Excellent.
And I think that's we're starting to see an improvement in that area with that group. And then we also have this huge event that's going on right now called Capes for Kids. And it's our signature peer-to-peer fundraiser. So we've got a whole bunch of people signed up to fundraise and wear a cape from the week of March 5th to 11th. So last year we got, about 4,000 brand new donors.
Wow.
Yeah. From that event alone. Not all of them agreed to be contacted, so there was a bit of that in the way. But we put together a really particular cultivation and stewardship strategy for that group. So they got a welcome series from us that included a message from our CEO. It had a video of a kid who was just amazing. It had some tips and tricks on how to advocate for people with disabilities. And then we slowly started integrating them into the rest of our asks throughout the year. So then that group is actually starting to convert into monthly giving, which is what I was hoping they would do.
There you go. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many pieces of what you said that I want to pull out because I think it's just really important to emphasize. So one is, making it about your mission throughout, so that from the start they have a good sense of the impact of their support. Mm-hmm. But also, if they're participating in something sports related, go back to them with something that's sports related, right?
Yeah.
Like you guys have a wealth of programs, right? Instead of using your generic stories or a generic campaign, like you really made it simple in their minds. Like people need to make that simple transition. So, okay, am I going to read this next email? Oh, okay. Yeah. Running, sports. I get it. Yeah. And I think that that's so valuable because from the inside, we always think of our organizations and we know the complexity, and they're complex. Mm-hmm. And we know all the different programs, and we think that like everyone.
And we think we know what works too, but we don't always know what works.
Yes. And so focusing just on how we understand our donors are interacting with us at that moment of time, and then starting to build their understanding, but not trying to have them understand everything about the organization, I think is so valuable. Yeah,
and organizations, especially even small organizations, the organization I'm at is currently a large one, but even small ones, they are so complex that sometimes we get in the weeds about what we do, and we forget that this one golden rule of fundraising is keep it simple.
Yeah.
So just simplifying down, like, what impact do we really have, and how do we shout that from the rooftops with our donors?
And taking what your donors have told you from those beginning calls that you made around what impact that they find is important, and reflecting that back to them. So one of the things we do on donor forms now with all of our clients is we actually have would send a message to the program participant, or whatever the case may be. We do it with surveys, we do it with donor forms, and we just want to hear what our donors are caring about and how they talk about it, because it's not how organizations talk about it.
Yeah. One of the things I love to include in the donor survey is what kinds of stories do you want to hear from us? Because I know what I think they should hear from us, but sometimes you get a little nugget of surprise from people. So what surprises me sometimes is the last time I did one at my old organization, people really wanted to hear community news from us. They wanted more about what's going on in the world about the issue that we were talking about versus, and they still wanted the client stories, obviously. We're still going to deliver in those, but it was surprising to me that they were looking to us as a source of information for that stuff.
Yeah, as a thought leader, which is
exactly
something people work years to develop. So, but I think that's a very good example of you need to hear that from your donors. Don't assume you're a thought leader or necessarily try to be a thought leader if that's not in your fundraising materials. That's not something that people care about. But if they care about it, dive in.
Yeah. If they don't need that from you, then give them something else.
Yeah. Just going back for a second to the idea of cannibalizing event donor or event revenue.
I don't think asking for other things cannibalizes your event revenue. Your events are they're a unique experience that people are going to want to take part in. And I think that once you start giving people the opportunity to support in other ways or engage in other ways, that just makes the event experience even better for them, because they feel so much more connected when they can say, I'm a monthly donor too, or I read this article that they wrote, or whatever it is that they're engaging with. Makes that event experience more robust, and possibly even makes them want to bring their friends, which is what you want from your donors.
For sure. With an organization I'm working with right now, we do a lot of micro events, like 10, 15 people, maybe 20. And our existing donors are our best champions at those events, because they will talk up the organization in a way that's much more convincing than if I were to.
Yeah, it's much more genuine when somebody is talking about you and they don't work for you.
Exactly. And then the person next to them is like, oh yeah, I'm a member too. And all of a sudden it's like, well, why wouldn't you be a donor? Because everyone seems to be a donor and they all love it. And so there's a sense of groundswell, or
it's also this idea that you want your donors to feel like they're part of an authentic community. And when they're engaged in different ways, they have that experience. So they
Sorry, the dog.
So you want to build that real, genuine community experience. And when your donors are talking to each other and bringing their friends, that's when you've kind of hit that.
100%. So can you so we were talking earlier today about an event that will remain nameless, where they asked everyone in the room to make a donation above and beyond the cost of being at the event, which is very common. It didn't go so well. It was very uncomfortable in that instance for the people in the room. But that's usually, I hear the opposite. If you do it well, it can be very uplifting. And people feel like they're contributing towards a mission. How can you tie monthly giving into that in an effective way?
I think one of the ways you can do it that would likely work with that group, because often when you're asking for people to give a gift at an event, the threshold is a little bit higher. So you might want to consider being able to say, we're asking you to give however much a year, and if you want, we can do it in a monthly pledge. So breaking it down to, well, that's only, $5 a month or whatever the amount breakdown is. So positioning it that way can be helpful, and that's a good way to get people into your monthly giving program by allowing them to think of it as fulfilling a pledge every month, and then going back to them at the end of it and saying, do you want to continue? This was great. And giving them the opportunity to renew that pledge at the end of the year.
Awesome. Okay. I think a lot of people, you sort of just tapped on this idea of monthly giving as like a 12-month gift versus like an ongoing support. So how do you be clear with your donors, and what are their expectations, and how do you set their expectations? Because obviously we want gifts that continue, right? Like everyone's clear. That's the goal.
Yeah,
we want gifts that don't end after a year, that keep on going without any ask at that time.
I haven't really had too much experience with donors being misunderstanding whether that it's a 12-month period versus an ongoing monthly gift. And it might also be, so there's some, in Canada at least, there's some legislation around what information you have to include on the forms for monthly giving, which include letting donors know that they're able to cancel it at any time. And I think that information, having it there, helps donors really understand that it is an ongoing thing. It's until you tell us to stop, we will not. Or until your card declines 3 times, we will not stop. So I haven't had too much experience with people thinking of it as a time-limited thing.
Great.
Yeah.
Where do you lose monthly donors?
In the declines. That's why it's really important to have a system to follow up with people whose credit card didn't go through that month, or their check was NSF, or whatever it was. It's really important to have those processes in place, because they don't mean to have their monthly gift end. It's just, it just happened to decline and you're playing telephone tag or whatever it is. So what I try to do is, when a donation's declined, we give the donor a call. If we can't get a hold of them, I usually send a letter with a little tear off at the bottom, because I'm the worst person at answering the phone. I would rather, actually, as a late millennial, I would rather you send me a piece of mail, because I'll probably pay more attention to that than a phone call. Yeah. So we try both in terms of getting updated contact information, but making sure you have those systems in place to deal with the drops and declines are really important. And then what I'm trying to start up at Hull and Bloorview is once a year calling all those donors whose gifts were declined in the last year or so and being like, hey, remember us? Want to try that again and see if they reactivate. So I would say, you lose your monthly donors just because in their heads it's such a set it and forget it deal, that they might forget to update us when their credit card expires. So,
yeah. I love that idea of once a year going back to anyone who lapsed because of credit card decline. Yeah. Because I do know people are surprised when you tell them that they haven't given for 6 months. They're like, oh, what do you mean?
Yeah. Like aren't you checking your bank statements?
Yeah. No, they're not. Something we're probably all a little guilty of, but I think that in my experience, and it sounds like in yours too, and it's really important that we give people lots of opportunity to get back in as monthly donors, because I don't think it's their intention for the most part to stop giving.
Yeah, generally, it's maybe 5% of cases that people will call me and say, I just can't do it anymore. Can we terminate it? Yeah. It's not very frequent that someone will reach out and ask us to end their monthly gift for an actual reason besides decline. So yeah.
So follow up. It's so important. So talk to me a little bit more. You sort of mentioned the stewardship process around one-time donors to monthly donors, but how do you steward your monthly donors? Because even though technically, except for declined credit cards, these people don't need a lot of maintenance. Yeah. But that doesn't mean they don't deserve being really important to your organization. So how do you do that?
For sure. So what we currently have in place at Holland Blue Review is as soon as somebody signs up for monthly gift, I give them a call and say thank you. And I ask them, what prompted this today? Tell me a little bit about yourself, that kind of thing. So just get some information from them to see what inspired them to give. And then I send them another welcome package. So we have one that's tailored specifically to and branded for our Team Possible monthly giving program. So they get, and it's one page. When I was doing this, when I worked at Interval House and we had no money for it, I printed it on the printer, sometimes black and white. And I actually used to print out 4x6 photos of the kids at the shelter that we had permission to share, and would tape it to the to the welcome pack and then send it. And it really worked for us because at the shelter our brand was very scrapbooky, so it kind of
totally works.
Yeah,
better done than like fancy. People don't always want fancy.
Exactly. So it had like a little story, that 4x6 photo. It had a survey that half the donors didn't send back, but people like being asked for their opinion regardless. And so we'd send them that, or right now we have a one pager that they get as a welcome, and a little, because our brand for the monthly giving program is Team Possible, it's a little magnet pennant that I got for like 10 cents each, that we send them. They're pretty cheap. I found a really good supplier, that they get pretty immediately after signing up for a monthly gift. And then they get little touch points through the year. So I've kind of got a chart that I keep for monthly donors specifically about what they get when, and it includes some of the direct mail pieces. So they generally get excluded from our direct mail program, except for the newsletters that go out, because those are more of a thank you and a stewardship piece for them. And then they get a thank you call once a year from a family or a beneficiary of one of our programs. We'll send a survey once in a while to them. I try with the monthly donors as much as possible to give them information like news and updates before anybody else, which I think is one of the best ways that you can steward your donors, is make them feel like the insiders, bring them into your circle. So if you've got like a campaign that you're launching, or there's some breaking news or anything that's that could be time sensitive, that you think that like something you would tell your best friend first, you want to do that with your monthly donors. So you want to bring them in the circle before you bring in anyone else.
I love that advice. How often, this is another perpetual debate at organizations, how often do you send newsletters or e-newsletters or these updates?
So I think that you should be communicating with your donors at least once a month. And for us, that's our e-newsletter. Like that covers off that monthly contact. It goes out to everybody. We can and will be segmenting out for the monthly donor group so that they get some custom messaging, but basically get very similar letter content that the regular donors get. Mm-hmm. But yeah, planning out those touch points for basically once a month. So whether that's with your monthly e-newsletter or every couple months, giving someone a call and just saying thanks. They don't have to be complicated, and they don't have to cost you any money to do. Just have to set aside a little bit of time.
Amazing. Oh my God, I feel like we already covered so much. I want to just check in with everyone on the call, because we haven't had that many questions. I think it's because there's been like so much rich content, but does anyone have any questions at this point? Or I know I got an email while we were on the call that I didn't properly read with a question. Oh, okay. I don't think this is not necessarily a question for today, but it leads me to another question for today, which is upgrading or moving people into major gift prospects from monthly giving.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fun time. How does that work?
I would suggest, when you're doing your phone calls to people whose gifts were declined and their monthly gift ended, at the same time, plan to call your monthly donors who haven't upgraded in the last year and give them the opportunity to upgrade their gift amount. So whether that's adding $2 a month or $10 a month, whatever it is that they can afford, give them the opportunity, because part of the reason why people don't do that is because nobody asks.
Yeah. So one of the things I get asked all the time from everyone is, how would you actually say that? If it's on a phone call, most people don't have experience with that conversation. What would you say? What's like a quick script?
I would call someone and say thank you so much for your gift, and give them a little bit about what it made possible in the last year. Let them know how much of a difference that their monthly donation is making, and then let them know, well, there's still a lot of work to do. So would you consider doing this? Would you consider upgrading to, if they're giving $20 a month, would you upgrade to $25 a month? Is that something you'd be able to do? And it's a no pressure phone call. It's kind of a stewardship check-in, because you're stewarding them by making sure they're giving the amount that they're comfortable giving. So following that very similar script to most fundraising appeals is, thank you, here's what you made possible, here's the stuff we still got to do, how can we count on you, kind of.
Awesome.
There's also a webinar that Simon Scriber is really great with telemarketing. So I found a webinar that he did that basically takes you through a call structure. So when we have volunteers who are coming in to help with telemarketing, telefundraising calls, I have them watch his webinar before they do it, because his call structure is really great.
Oh,
and share it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I can't. His Change Fundraising is his website. But if you have that webinar,
I have it. It might be behind.
Is it online or?
It's online, but it might be behind a paywall. I'll see if it's not. Yeah.
Right. Very cool. Okay.
Oh, and the other half of that question was how to transition them to major gift.
Yes.
So I think a lot of that would be really based on what you glean in those conversations from your donor, and whether they actually have the capacity to upgrade to major gifts. So you want to do a little bit of research on your monthly donors, whether that's just even plugging their address into Google Maps and seeing where they live, because that's sometimes an indicator. If you have software like iWave or any of those things, you can get capacity rankings from them, or just a quick Google search to see where they're giving elsewhere. So if they're giving at your major gift threshold, they would be a good prospect to move up. And then what you want to start doing is seeing whether you can get those in-person meetings, those tours, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you regularly scan your list for those types of prospects? How often?
So we have at Blue Review, we have a team dedicated to leadership giving, and we have a meeting every 2 weeks. It's called Prospect Review. So basically it's an opportunity for us to bring forward people who are in our portfolios who we think have leadership capacity. And so what we'll do is, like what I do, because my portfolio has quite a few donors in it because it's annual. I'll grab a segment and run them through the software that we currently use, which is iWave, to get the wealth scorings on them. And if anyone has a certain wealth scoring, they come forward to Prospect Review. If it's a name that I'm like, oh, that's a name, I recognize that name as being a family with capacity, I'll bring them straight to Prospect Review without doing the wealth screening. So it's part of it is just kind of being familiar with the names in your community that might be either well connected or have the capacity to give more. Yeah.
So much of what we talked about is quote unquote virtual, by mail or like online. Do you do anything to get in front of your monthly donors face to face?
Yeah, so we tried a couple of times to do what we called a tea-in tour with our donors, to bring them in for a little quick chat and then a tour of the hospital. We didn't have great success with that, I think partly because the way that we branded it wasn't really, like, our audience wasn't really keen on that tea-in tour concept. But we're looking at other ways to engage. The hospital where I work has this amazing research arm. There's so much stuff we can demo that I think bringing donors in to like play video games, I think would probably be more interesting than drinking tea in a room. So giving them the opportunity to come in, whether it's one-on-one or with a group or at a specific event, I try to get people in the building as much as possible. Partly because when people come into the building is when they really fall in love. That's when they really see what the organization does. So.
Yeah. I was going to say, if you can get like the kids demoing or teaching them how to play those video games or whatever, that's cool.
One of the things that we do with our board of directors is once a year they have a board retreat where they get to play with all the things that comes out of our research institute, and they love it. And I'm trying to figure out how to model that same concept for a different audience.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I love that for so many reasons. I mean, that's one of the first things I teach boards when we teach them fundraising. Sorry. Because my little mic. Is they need to be on the front lines. They need to have their story from when they did that, or they volunteered serving a meal in the shelter, or what have you. And then they take that story and that becomes their foundation for fundraising. And if you can equip your donors for that, not only are they themselves deepening their commitment, but then they become your best champions, because now they have a story. If anyone asks them about why they support you or whatever, they're so excited they can't not share the story.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm finding that as, so I mentioned earlier that a lot of our monthly donors were friends and family of clients of the hospital. But as we're moving to more recruiting people who are from the general public, they may not have that connection the way that friends and family do. So being able to bring them through the door to, jump in our ball pit and play a video game and, check out our snoozling room, like all these really cool things that we have on site that you don't know about until you come through the doors. Giving them that opportunity to connect and create their own story is what's going to, spread our word throughout the community.
I love that. It's not really monthly giving related, as we've talked, but one of the things that I think organizations struggle with is just their list. And like, you kind of hear about, like, this works well if you have an existing annual giving list.
Yeah.
But a lot of organizations don't have that great of an annual giving list. So how do they build that really quickly? Because I know that's a whole other session, but I think it's relevant to a lot of people on the call.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to build a monthly giving program when you don't have a primed audience. So if I had to prioritize what I was going to focus on, I would focus on building the annual donor list before I started trying to tackle monthly giving, because that is where you're going. Really, that's who you're aiming for. But if you don't want to prioritize it that way, we're testing the waters a bit more with digital acquisition. So looking at, what are some cool Facebook campaigns that we can do that are monthly giving focused? Can we do a giving day that's around our Team Possible program? So looking at kind of taking some of those traditional direct marketing tactics and making it a monthly giving ask instead of just a single gift ask. So I think looking at the digital channels, probably the place where you will have the most success when it comes to just a straight monthly donor ask. Sick Kids is doing some work right now. I'm sure everyone has seen, if they're in Toronto, Sick Kids ads that are around monthly giving. So what's really great is they're saying, like, we need 5,000 monthly donors to build this building. So it's a really tangible ask that they're doing, and it's really recruiting a whole bunch of people who just otherwise wouldn't have been on their file. Mind you, they have like a $30 million ad buy, so
and they're Sick Kids.
And they're sick.
Yeah, and it's interesting because other people here will also know, and other cities will be very familiar with street canvassers. Who only focuses monthly giving. Well, they're not allowed to accept one-time donations. We just worked with a very neighborhood-based organization who had volunteers who were willing to go door to door. So, and the mission was very focused in that community. And so we said, well, let's go. If you have people, let's go door to door. Listen, try it. See how it works.
It's a challenging one to execute, because if people don't know the brand,
at
least if it's a local brand and you're going locally, you're probably safe. There was another women's shelter when I was still in the sector that did a really good job at neighborhood canvassing. If you're a national or provincial organization, you don't have brand recognition, it's probably not the best approach. So.
It has to make sense. So you pick the channel that makes sense to you. And for anyone who's curious about Facebook ads and stuff like that, there's so many resources online around how to learn how to do that, that are totally free. And it's really cool what you can do.
And you don't have to spend a lot with Facebook to see some return. Like you can, invest $5 in a boosted post and you'll see some return on that. So and you can target people based on their geography. You can target people based on your email list. So you can actually sync your email list with your Facebook audience. You can target people based on their other interests. So let's say I'd be really curious if you guys would ever try to target people who follow sick kids or something like that. I don't know, but something like that's just an example. Yeah. I know that one of our audiences on Facebook is like the friends of our followers. Which is a good one because it means that we're reaching out to people who are already inclined or familiar with us. But we have been doing the here's our email list, upload it, and we both target to that audience and we create a lookalike audience off of it.
For anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about,
the whole other journey.
Look up here. I'm going to type in the chat. Rick Mulready is a great, and who else does really good Facebook ad stuff? Oh, what's his name?
I like WordStream. They have a lot of information. It can be a bit overwhelming, but if you're getting into very detailed targeting and campaigns and stuff, WordStream is a really great place to start. Take that in.
Hold on, I'm looking up one more for you guys. Heart, Soul, and Hustle has a great free Facebook. His name's Zach. Great free mini course on Facebook ads that gives you a lot of information. So I think the benefit, so what can be a disadvantage in not having a great starting point is that you can try things for very low cost, see what works, and be nimble, right?
Yeah, and also remember that what works for one organization might not work for you. So it's really about just testing out strategies and failing forward if you do fail, learning from that experience and figuring out, who your donors best. So if any of the things I've said, or you think, oh, that's not going to work with my group, you might be right. Test out a different strategy, A/B test here and there wherever you can, but it's more about learning who your donors are versus taking my advice.
Well, your donors know your donors best. So listen to your donors and engage them in the process. I had this what I thought was a brilliant idea to do this initiative coming up, and I tested it by a couple donors. So okay. I would have relied on them to get people out. And I was like, if you're not going to buy in, I'm not going to waste my time trying to develop an idea and convince you. Why don't I just think of something that co-create something that works really well?
Yeah, one of the great things about working at Floorview is we do have this family leader program of volunteers from the families that use our services. And so they're a natural place to go when we have, and because we're so patient-centered in the way that we work both as an organization and as a foundation, we don't do any fundraising campaigns without first checking with them to see if they think it's a good idea, if they have ideas and input, and all. Capes for Kids, which is our signature event, was generated by that group of family leaders. So they're a natural fit for us to go to and be like, what do you think of this? Is it crazy? Would it work? Do you like it? Where do you see the flags? And so they're really great at being able to kind of help guide the fundraising that we do. And they're often the audience that we would be targeting anyways. So
and definitely fundraising committees, if they're effective, are a great place for that. But I would caution, sometimes fundraising committees are not so connected to the mission in the way that this family group is. And they don't understand fundraising. So just sort of figure out like the people who are going to be your biggest champions in helping you be successful in fundraising. If that's your fundraising committee, if that's your families.
Might be one of your social media followers who shares literally everything you post. That's the person.
Oh my God. Influencer.
Yeah.
That's a whole other topic, which I really want to figure out some influencer, quote unquote, not marketing, but fundraising. That's something I haven't had the opportunity to play with yet. Yeah. All right. So I'm aware of the time, and I feel like we didn't get that many questions. So hopefully it's because everything was really straightforward and in-depth and detailed, and you guys have lots to take back. But we have a few minutes. Thanks, Allison. Thanks, guys. You're awesome too. These are so fun for me. I love it.
Good for the self-esteem.
No, I meant the whole thing, not just that comment.
That comment.
That comment too. Yeah. But it's always nice to talk shop and share some best practices, especially from people as wonderful as you, Ashleigh. So
thank you.
We'll stick around for another couple minutes in case anyone has questions and they're a little slower at typing. But yeah, otherwise, hope you have something you can go back to your organization and do. Take action on. Amazing. Awesome. All right. It looks like we're good.
All right.
That was fantastic. So, so relevant to what organizations that I know are dealing with. So thanks, Ashleigh.
Thanks for thinking of me on this topic.
Anytime. All right. Bye, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.